Sacrifice. Michael's descent into London's darkest secrets. Michael, a 30-year-old adventurer from London, often found himself wandering the city's labyrinth of streets, seeking the thrill of the unknown. Late one Friday night, he slipped into a shadowy bar, its corners draped in dim light, where the air buzzed with the clinks of glasses, the low hum of hushed conversations, and the distant strumming of a lone guitarist. He was alone, as usual, his eyes scanning the room for something, or someone, unseen, yet tantalizingly close. That's when he noticed them, a group of four, seated at a nearby table, their presence almost magnetic. 3 men and a woman, each one radiating a peculiar aura that set them apart from the usual late-night crowd. Their voices carried over the ambient noise, laced with an air of secrecy, drawing Michael's curiosity like a moth to a flame. They caught his gaze. A subtle, unspoken connection sparked across the room. One of the men, tall, with raven hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see through the dark, beckoned him over with a nod. His name, as Michael soon learned, was Elias. The others introduced themselves. Luca, a wiry figure with a perpetual smirk. Adrian, silent and brooding, his eyes sharp and probing. And Mara, a striking woman with an unsettling calm, as if she knew the end of every story before it began. They called themselves travelers, though the way they said it hinted at journeys far stranger than mere city hopping. Over drinks, their conversation drifted into the realm of the fantastic, the impossible. They spoke of a place, not far from London, veiled in ancient lore and shadowed by myth. "Tonight is special," Elias whispered, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. "A night that comes but once in a century, when the stars align to open a gateway to somewhere else." The others nodded in solemn agreement, their faces set in a mix of anticipation and gravity. They invited Michael to join them, to witness something beyond the bounds of normal experience. The invitation was a temptation, one that Michael, ever the seeker of the extraordinary, could not resist. 2 days later, they gathered again, this time under the fading light of the evening. The journey out of London was filled with stories, ancient rituals, pagan gods, forgotten legends, tales spun with such detail that they seemed almost too vivid, too real. Elias spoke of cosmic forces converging, a rare celestial event that would unlock doors to the unknown. Michael listened, enraptured, though the full meaning of their words eluded him. An hour later, they arrived. A vast meadow, bordered by an ancient forest, stretched out before them. The air was thick, charged with a strange energy, a palpable sense of anticipation that made Michael's skin prickle. Their destination lay within the forest, Elias explained, a place known only to a select few. As they crossed the meadow, an uneasy feeling began to take root in Michael's mind, a sense that the forest was not just a collection of trees, but something far older, far more aware. The moment they entered the forest, the atmosphere shifted. The usual symphony of nature fell silent, replaced by an oppressive stillness that pressed in on them from all sides. The deeper they ventured, the more the weight of the group's tales settled on Michael's shoulders, the words of ancient rites and dark deities echoing in his mind. Yet he brushed it off, attributing it to his imagination, the product of too many ghost stories in the dark. After what felt like an eternity, they emerged into a small clearing. At its center stood a circle of stones, twisted and warped, forming a spiral that seemed almost alive. The group halted, and Elias declared that they had arrived. The air in the clearing was thick, almost suffocating, charged with a tangible energy that made Michael's heart pound in his chest. The stones seemed to pulse with a life of their own, their rough surfaces shifting in the flickering light. As night fell, they gathered around a fire, its flames casting long, writhing shadows across the clearing. Mara began to speak, her voice soft but heavy with the weight of centuries. She told of the place's dark history, of sacrifices made to an ancient god. At first, animals. But on nights like this, when the stars aligned, the offerings became human. Her words wrapped around Michael like a shroud, a chill settling deep into his bones. A cup was pressed into his hands, filled with a bitter herbal concoction. He drank, the taste sharp and unpleasant, and almost immediately, a wave of drowsiness washed over him. His eyelids grew heavy, the world around him blurring at the edges, until he slipped into a deep, dreamless sleep. In the dead of night, Michael awoke to the sound of chanting, low, rhythmic, and ominous. He stumbled out of his tent, disoriented, his mind foggy. What he saw froze him in place. His companions, Elias, Luca, Adrian, and Mara, were kneeling around the fire, their faces illuminated by its flickering light, their voices raised in unison in a language he didn't recognize. But it was the figure standing before them that truly terrified him. A towering, shadowy form loomed above the group, its shape shifting and writhing as if woven from the darkest corners of a nightmare. Its eyes, glowing with a malevolent intelligence, locked onto Michael, and in that instant, he felt every muscle in his body seize up. He was paralyzed, trapped in the gaze of this otherworldly creature, his mind screaming for escape while his body remained frozen, a prisoner to the ancient force that now held him in its grasp. The chanting grew louder, more intense, and with it, a terrible realization dawned on Michael. He was the sacrifice, the offering to this dark god. A fate sealed the moment he had agreed to follow these strangers into the unknown. As the darkness closed in around him, he understood, with a cold clarity, that there would be no escape. This was the end, an end written long before he ever set foot in that bar, an end he could never have imagined, swallowed whole by the ancient, malevolent power that had claimed him as its own.